Good evening, everyone. I just want to make sure that our remote guests can hear me.
Yes.
Please confirm.
Yes.
Somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. So my name is Eric Ferron, and I'm a professor here at KAUST. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Renzo Caballero Rosas in this room as he will be defending his Ph.D. Renzo came to me how long ago? Three years ago. So yes. So essentially, if you take 23, you remove 3, and you get COVID. And so he came to see me basically as the campus was painfully trying to restart after the first, after the first wave of scare. And so Renzo told me I'm applied math and computational sciences. Oh my God, okay, a theoretical guy. And then I learned more. He said, well, I'm really an electrical engineer. I said, okay, where is that? How is that happening? He said, well, that's where I graduated from when I went to the University of the Republic of Nicaragua, Uruguay. Sorry for the Uruguayos and sorry for the Nicaraguayans. And so I apologize, Uruguay. And I met many smart Uruguayos before. And so I said, okay, so let's think about a subject for you. And I don't know, for some reason, I was relatively new. I mean, it was, I had been for 6 months, maybe a little bit more, like 9 months at KAUST. And I thought, okay, self-repairing robots. I mean, I'm in a robotic lab. People expect me to do robotics, so let's make self-repairing robots. And a subject I know not so much about. I mean, I have a talent for suggesting things to my students that I have no clue about. And then Renzo said, "All right, I'll take the deal, and we'll see what we can do with that." So this is a little bit of the context. I must add that Renzo had been at KAUST before I was there, since he's been at KAUST since 2018. 2017? Oh my God. Okay.
That's why you know.
And what I would like to say is that Renzo has been a very free, like maintenance-free student. He's been running his own little entertainment center in the lab up until like impossible hours. He would be basically in the office from 8 in the morning to until midnight, and always entertaining whoever had questions and who needed an answer to pretty much any question you wanted. So you will understand how I consider Renzo to be sort of a very particular kind of AMCS student, given what he will show you. So the topic that you showed, the title you shows was modeling and analysis of self-repair systems. And so please go ahead and explain to us what that is.
Thank you. Thank you a lot, Eric, for the very warm introduction. I really appreciate it. And yes, as Eric mentioned, I present my PhD thesis today, modeling and analysis of self-repair systems. So essentially, I will start with the motivation. After we show the background, I will show the initial core paper, the first paper I published in this field, and after the 4 follow-up papers that they came after that one, they are direct continuations of this work. And finally, we close with conclusions and future work. We start with the motivation. So basically, for some definitions, we say that a system or a robot can self-assembly when it can assemble and disassemble its own parts. It can self-replicate. We can fabricate copies of all its parts, and it can self-repair. We can fabricate copies of all its broken parts or can repair them. These are the definitions that we are going to follow during this presentation. So what is the motivation for such systems? So there are places on Earth, like for example, the empty quarter in Saudi Arabia or Atacama Desert in South America. There are places on Earth where humans can barely survive for a few days or even a few hours without the correct equipment. So we believe that in order to colonize or do harvesting in these places, robots are the way to go. A colony of robots is like a perfect candidate to colonize such places. We can also think a bit more further and see the surface of the moon and the surface of Mars, which are basic already. Humans can survive only a few seconds without the correct equipment, and it's extremely expensive to make them habitable for humans. So again, we strongly believe that a community of autonomous robots is almost the only possible candidate to colonize these places. So now we can talk a bit about the background. Paul Newman, he was the first scientist to formalize a theory for self-replicating robots in 1948. He approached the subject from a probabilistic point of view, and he introduced a very important question: how can a reliable system be subtract from unreliable components? Some years after, Richard Feynman, he mentioned a very similar problem in his famous talk, There is Plenty of Room at the Bottom. He suggests a mental experiment where a machine fabricates a copy of itself, but at a smaller scale. And the second machine fabricates another copy, but at even smaller scale. So he mentioned that in order to keep this process going as much as you want, at some point you need to increase the resolution of the fabrication. Otherwise, the resolution of the machine, the fabrication will be of the same order of the size of the machine. So then the error in the fabrication will make impossible the replication. So somehow we need to increase the resolution or improve the replication process as we go. So a bit of background about this kind of solved systems. On the plot on the left here, we see the number of journal papers that they publish per year in some specific topics. For example, self-healing and self-organizing systems are the most popular ones. We can see around 600 journal papers per year. Self-healing refer to materials that after you damage them, somehow they can regenerate, but it's more related with chemistry. And self-organizing system, this one, is more related with a lot of robots organizing themselves to simulate larger destruction. In our case, we work with what is called kinematic self-repairing machine, which is the red one here, which of course, when we remove the ones with more tendency, we can see the plot here. The number of current number of journal papers per year is around 50, but we can see that the tendency is increasing almost exponentially, which just shows some interest from the community about this kind of topics. So we want to work, as Alec mentioned, I'm applied mathematics guy, but also we really care about hard work. We don't want to just stuck in theory. So we choose a robot, in this particular case a 3D printer, as a proof of concept device. We want to understand how a 3D printer can self-repair. Why we choose a 3D printer? For two reasons. First, because by default, it's a robot that can fabricate parts. So it's extremely convenient. If we choose another kind of robot, we have additional problem of fabricating parts that the 3D printer by default can do it. So it's a good choice. The second reason is a more futuristic reason. We believe that in a group of robots or a society of autonomous robots, a 3D printer will play a key role because it can fabricate parts for all the robots in the community. So if the printer can repair itself, then maybe the whole community of robots can repair itself. How a 3D printer works, probably most of you know, but just in case, basically you can design your 3D model in a computer, and the printer basically adds layers of material, and this it completes the body you want to print. Yeah, and now we will start with what they call the core paper, the first paper we published with Professor Taylor. So essentially, this is a CAD of our 3D printer. It's a desktop, affordable 3D printer. We want to analyze if this 3D printer can repair itself at some extent. So what we do, we can see here the nozzle. This is the part where the material is being deposited. So this nozzle, it moves on this plane, and it's depositing material as it moves. This motor here controls the x-axis movement of the nozzle. This motor makes this timing pulley here rotate, which controls the belt and controls the movement of the nozzle. What we do on this first paper is to break or to damage this nozzle here. Sorry, this timing pulley here. We damage the timing pulley, so now the dynamics of the printer are not ideal anymore, but we try to verify if still with a non-ideal printer, we can print an ideal pulley in order to replace the broken die by one and claim the chips of repair, at least for this particular case. So how we simulate a broken pulley? We go to extreme case where we substitute basically the ideal circular pulley by a triangular one. So the system, the printer now is extremely non-ideal. And we verify if we can print still in open loop without giving any extra instruction to the printer. We verify if we can print an ideal circular one. Of course, we can see the printer is not going to work ideally because we have this pulley here. So whatever we print will not be an exact perfect pulley. But we believe that maybe, in some sense, will be better than the original one we had here, than the broken one. So we ask ourselves, okay, we obtain something, maybe not perfect, but what if we replace on the printer, the initial one, the triangular one, by whatever we print, and we repeat this process of printing again, and we do it many times, what will happen? It was a original first question, was basically a first experiment. We observed that after only 2 iterations of doing this process, the printer actually repairs itself. After the 2 iterations of doing this process of replacing, the printer repairs itself. So for this particular case, with this particular initial condition, we can claim that the printer repaired itself, which is fantastic. It was at least interesting for us. It was a nice observation. So we asked ourselves, does this always work for different initial conditions or only for the triangular one? It's a fair question. So we were thinking, this process of replacing and printing, it takes hours and wastes material. What if we build a digital twin for a 3D printer, which means a simulation that mimics the printing process in order to try with many initial conditions, with many post-initial conditions very fast, and we verify if all of them converge to the ideal one. So we start by modeling the interaction between the timing pulley and the belt. Our first main assumption is ideally all pulleys with the same convex fold influence the printer equally. And we can see here that the belt can only see the convex part of the timing pulley. So this assumption is strong and is very useful for us. And it allows us to define equivalent class for the timing pulleys. 2 pulleys are equivalent if and only if they have the same convex fold. We will use this equivalent class on the third paper I will show today. So now we go to the actual model between the rotation of the pulley and the movement of the nozzle. So we work with a stepper motor. A printer works with stepper motors. So a stepper motor can take only 200 discrete positions between 0 and 2 pi. So let's say delta W is 1 discrete step. When the motor rotates a delta W, 1 step, the belt will move, will displace a delta U, which is related with the radius of the pulley. We can divide here and go to the limit. So basically to find the instant velocity of the belt as the angular position of the timing pulley. And of course, it is equal to R for ideal pulleys. But this quantity, the quantity that relays the rotation with the pulley and the movement of the nozzle, is not equal to R when the pulley is not ideal. Quantity here, we call it instant displacement, and it's fully characterized the movement of the nozzle. Yeah, and if the quantity you want to model and find in order to simulate the printing process. So this block diagram here, this block diagram here, essentially, it shows the simulated printing process. So essentially, we have a timing pulley of the printer, let's say a triangular one. We find the convex fold first. From the convex fold, we plan using geometry, we can find an exact value for the instant displacement, which again is the relation between the rotation of the pulley and the movement of the nozzle. We find an exact value for that convex fold. From this relation here, from the instant displacement, we can simulate the printing process. We simulate the printing process, so we observe what we obtain once we print. We replace it on the printer, we find the convex fold again, and we basically simulate this experiment many times. So here are some examples of timing pulleys, how the simulation works. We have triangular pulley, a circular pulley, and a hard one, that I dedicate to my wife. So the main idea is like we discretize the convex fold of each pulley into a set of discrete triangles. And from that triangles and geometry, we can approximate the instant displacement, which is exact, even the discretization. So we validate our simulation. Basically, on the top, we see the first experiment we showed at the beginning, and on the bottom, this is the simulated printing process, which approximates fairly well the experiment, and we validate for different initial conditions, not only the triangular one. Yeah. Here with our initial condition. It's a very small pulley, which after only 3 iterations, it converges to the ideal one, and the simulate, our digital twin predicts the same. We validate one more time with this very challenging pulley, basically a small rectangle. Of course, the printer was struggling a lot. You can see the first element of the iteration. But again, after only 3 iterations, converge to the ideal one, and the simulation predicts the same. So now we are happy. We believe that our digital twin is good, so we can try with many initial conditions, and we verify, let's say, hundreds of thousands of them, and all of them converge to the real timing pulley. Fantastic. But we know, because of mathematics, is enough the existence of only one pulley that doesn't converge to break all the theory. So on the third paper I will show today, basically I show the mathematical proof that actually this iterative process always converges to the ideal timing pulley. And I want to fix ideas, I want to show you a very small video that shows this actually how we model and we simulate the printing process. Let me show you. Yeah, it's only 1 minute. Okay. Okay, so the conclusion for this paper is that we show an experiment where the 3D printer achieves a prepare. We model and simulate the initial twin to experiment with numerous initial conditions. And also, we prove mathematically that the system always achieves a prepare under certain strong assumptions. I'm not showing on these slides here, but actually on that paper, we were not satisfied with this idea of only simulation. We prove mathematically that we always achieve a prepare, but as I say, under some strong assumptions. On the third paper we show today, I relax a bit assumption as much as we can. We still prove that we achieve the prepare. So this slide here, it shows somehow my PhD path. This paper here is the one I just showed, where we model the twin and we show the experiment for self-preparing. On this second paper here, we ask ourselves, what if we break 2 pulleys at the same time? Do we still converge? What we have to do in order to make the system converge? On this paper here, we prove mathematically that the system here is always converges. On this paper, we expand the model, the computational model that we do here, to consider some extra non-idealities. And finally, on this paper, we ask ourselves, what if we break another part of the printer? Do we still converge? Do we still can we repair it? And I will go over all of them. So we start with the first one. What if we break 2 pulleys? So essentially, this is a top view of the 3D print. Before, on the previous paper, we're damaging this pulley here, the x-axis one, which was controlling the movement of the nose in this direction. Now we additionally damage the y-axis pulley, the one here, the red ones. Yeah, also all the red pulleys. So when we do an experiment for this particular case, we start with this initial condition on all the, basically we substitute these 3 pulleys by this one with this shape. And we repeat this experiment of printing and replacing to see what's happened. After 3 iterations, we observe, which is very interesting, we converge to a circular pulley. But it is circular, but it's not ideal. The radius of this pulley is not the ideal radius, it's slightly larger. And we observe that this iterative process, circular pulleys with any radius are fixed points. So once we reach a circular pulley with some arbitrary radius, this iterative method of printing and replacing will stay there forever. Which is, yeah, it is interesting. Before continuing, we want to, again, build a digital twin to predict this behavior. So we notice, or at least as our assumption, is that the effect, let's say we want to print this pulley. The effect of modifying the x-axis pulley and y-axis pulley are independent and can be added independently, which makes our life way easier. So basically, if we modify, for example, only the x-axis pulley, when we want to print a circle, we obtain this one here. When we modify only the y-axis, when we want to print a circle, we obtain this one here. When we modify both, we obtain this one here, and can be fine by just adding the two effects, one after the other one. This allows us to utilize our previous digital twin, and it's a trivial expansion from that previous work. So of course, we still need to validate anyway. We have different experiments. We all predict that we will convert to circular pulleys, and we compare the radius. I think the error is around 1% between the simulation and the real experiment. These are validations of this new assumption. And yeah, when we start with a square pulley, also convert to circular pulley, non-ideal radius. So okay, we observe with our simulation, we observe that in this particular case, where two pulleys are broken, we always converge to circular pulleys, but with not ideal radius. You see, not fine, because the efficiency of the system is not the very itself. It's a thing that that's not ideal. So we ask ourselves, what is the information regarding the initial? Because until now, the system, the printer had no idea what was wrong. We were just printing and replacing without knowing what was going on.
Sorry, Renzo, just one point. When you walk far from the laptop, then it's a bit difficult to hear you. So if you can stay a little bit close, it's better. Thanks.
Thank you a lot for letting me know. Thank you, Alessandro. I will be grabbing from now on, grabbing the microphone. Is it fine like this? Is it too loud?
No, it's perfect.
Fantastic. Thank you a lot. So we suggest this feedback loop here on this square. Here, we observe our printer, and we assume the addition of a camera that can observe the shape of the broken pulleys. So since we have this camera and we can observe the shape, we can insert that into a computer, run our simulation, find the value of the instant displacements, which fully characterize the relation again between the nozzles and the pulley, and from there, modify the reference that we want to print. Let's say this is ideal pulley. We want to print this object, C reference. So we find a C reference start in a quite trivial way, just applying an inverse transformation from these two functions. And then by doing this, the printer can repair itself in only one iteration, as we can see here on the right. Here we start with these pulleys, and by doing this, we achieve a circular ideal pulley in only one iteration, and the same with the square pulley. It seems fine. But when we remember, actually, we want a system, a printer to repair itself, and hopefully to also replicate. If we add a camera to the system, a camera is a quite complex object, and our printer only can print mechanical parts. If we increase the complexity of the printer in order to achieve self-repair in this way, if the camera gets broken, or if we want to replicate the camera, it's a big problem. So at the end of this work, we noticed that just increasing the complexity or increasing the autonomy of the system is not a very straightforward solution. If we make a system more complex, it's more difficult to replicate or repair. So the solution of the camera, yes, is fine, but it has additional problems. So in this paper, basically, we show that circular pulleys are attractive fixed points of the sequence, and we actually, as future work, we will prove it mathematically. We propose a feedback system to achieve self-repair, and we have identified this complexity versus autonomy trade-off, which is very important for us. So now I will talk about the second paper, which is a direct continuation from this one. From this one. Actually, this paper was nominated for the American Society of Mechanical Engineering for Best Paper Award in ACC 2023. It got second place. That's why I put nomination now first. Yeah. It's about the proof. It's about the proof of conversions for the method that we suggest here. So essentially, we have three main assumptions, three main mathematical assumptions. The first one, all time in pulleys with the same convex hull influence the printer equally. We talk out this assumption on the first paper, and we can see in the picture here one more time. The belt only can see the convex part. Our second assumption is that the tension on the belt is enough to avoid slips, but at the same time, it's not large enough to block the rotation of the pulley. So the tension on the belt is just good enough or ideal. Finally, our third assumption is that the pulley only rotates in the clockwise direction. Actually, we don't need to assume this to prove the theorem, but to make the proof way easier, yeah, it's an important assumption. So now we will talk again about the instant displacement, but I will be a bit more formal. So essentially, we define this function that, again, fully characterize the relation between the nozzle and the pulleys. We define the instant displacement for a time in pulley C using, I'm sorry for that delay, using the periodic function PC with period 2 pi corresponding to a full rotation of the pulley, representing the finitesimal translation of the belt as the pulley rotates. So on this example here, we have 3 pulleys, and we see the corresponding instant displacements. And it will be more clear, the meaning on the next slide. Yes. Here we see, when we want to print a circular pulley, and the printer already has a circular pulley on the x-axis, this pulley is the ideal one. So what we obtain after attempting to print is ideal. The instant displacement of this pulley is just 1. It means a linear ideal relation between the movement of the nozzle and the rotation of the pulley. When we utilize a square pulley, sometimes the nozzle moves faster than it should, and sometimes slower than it should. So we have expansion and compression effects on the printing. The same for the triangular pulley. Sometimes it advances, the nozzle moves less than it should, and we observe a compressing effect. This is the real meaning of the instant displacement. So now 2 important remarks. The first one, by assumption 1, if 2 timing pulleys share the same convex hull, then they have the same instant displacement. That is what I was mentioning before. The convex hull, they define an equivalent class for timing pulleys. There's a unique instant displacement for each convex hull. It's a 1-to-1 corresponding relation. The remark number 2 is that a timing pulley has unitary normalized instant displacement, ideal one, if the convex hull of that pulley is equal to the convex hull of the ideal timing pulley. So basically, if a convex hull is an ideal circle, then the instant displacement, if and only if the convex hull is an ideal circle, the instant displacement will be just 1. And that remark is very important. I will show it right now. Yeah. Now here we have the main theorem. Under assumptions 1, 2, or 3, and for any initial timing pulley on the printer, this sequence of printing and replacing always converges to the ideal timing pulley. That is the theorem we want to prove under assumption 1, 2, and 3. A corollary is that the ideal timing pulley is an attractive fixed point of this space of timing pulleys. So from wherever you start, you always converge to the ideal timing pulley. And to prove the theorem, we will prove an equivalent statement, consequence of remark number 2. We will prove that the sequence of instant displacements, they converge to the ideal instant displacement. Because, as I mentioned before, it's a unique relation, and only the ideal instant displacement corresponds to the ideal timing pulley. The proof is a bit long for this presentation, so I will show a kind of a sketch of the proof here on this slide. So essentially, let's assume we start with a triangular pulley on the x-axis of the printer, which has this instant displacement. There are 3 possible cases. The maximum or the supremum of this plot is above 1 and the infimum is below 1, which is this case here, or both quantities are above 1 or both quantities are below 1. So from these 3 cases, we can guess, regions from where the timing pulley we're planning to print will be in. So basically, whatever we print will be inside this green region here under this assumption. And from these guesses here, we can again guess the instant displacement. So basically, these are instant displacements, these are timing pulleys, and we can go between them. By doing that, we can show that the upper bound for the instant displacements is always larger than 1, decreasing, and under bound by 1. And the infimum is always below than 1, increasing, and upper bound by 1, which means it converges to 1 after infinite iterations, which means we converge to the ideal timing pulley and complete the proof. Yeah. So on this paper, essentially, we prove that this sequence always converges to the ideal timing pulley for any initial condition. We claim that since little work has been conducted in modeling and analyzing self-repair processes of physical systems, to guarantee self-repair, like in our case, even if it is for a specific case, at least we are showing a theorem that guarantees self-repair. So we believe there's some value in that. Now I will talk about the third paper, where we extend the mathematical model that we construct for the first paper. So basically, yeah, we want to consider some additional non-idealities here. We can see on the picture on the left that sometimes the teeth of the belt and the pulley they don't attach perfectly, they don't match perfectly, and we're assuming perfect match before in our digital twin. Also, we want to consider non-ideal tension on the belt, and we're going to consider slippage. So the justification of why we're doing this is as follows. We want to consider this effect because we know it's a reality and we know it happens. So we need to consider that. The non-ideal tension, sometimes when the printer is broken in some sense, we might have a loose belt. It can happen, the belt can be loose. So we really want to add that condition. We want to, we want to model that properly on our self-repair system. And the slippage actually is a bit interesting. It's not only to make the system simulation more real and more complex, also it is a necessary condition to guarantee a unique existence of a unique solution for the simulation. Because now also we add many non-ideal timing pulleys to the simulation. They all work with the same belt. So sometimes the solution might be overdetermined. Slippage is needed to guarantee the existence of a unique solution. Yeah. So what we do exactly? Basically, to model a loose belt, we need to first know the ideal length for each time. For example, in this case, let's say on the top part, the ideal length will be the distance from P2 prime to P2. So it's L2 here. And we need to know the actual length. So by utilizing our digital twin from the first paper, we can find the values of these contact points for each time. And by having as initial condition the values of the ease, the actual length of the pulleys, of the belts, we can track that and we can simulate the movement of the belt, assuming an initial loose belt. Yeah. So basically, this is the model. We're considering that now we can simulate a system with a single belt, but n non-ideal timing pulleys and n+1 bearings and 1 mass. So in addition, on this paper, in addition to extend the model, we wanted to validate what we did on the first paper just in real data. These plots here are values of instant displacements, the plots we are trying to find most of the time, for different pulleys. And this is real data. We obtain it from a camera, a track system from our lab with a very good resolution. So this is real data. And yes, and we compare the real data with these bounds that are constructed by assuming, in the blue case, perfect match in the teeth of the belt and the pulleys, and in the top case, assuming perfect mismatch. So essentially, given our model, the real data, which is the yellow one, should be always between these bands here, the upper band and under bound. We can observe, probably you notice that sometimes it doesn't happen. We believe that is because we are smoothing the data too much. But why? Because this data from the cameras is position data, which has noise. This is velocity as a function of angular position. So we need to compute the derivative of this position. And compute the derivative of something with noise, it creates just a lot of noise. So to compensate that, we smooth the data, but sometimes we believe it was very difficult to find a sweet spot. Smoothing in such a way, yeah, we just prefer to go with the same smoothing for all the plots, and this is the result. So also, we validate, yes, with our previous, on this slide, we validate this tooth mismatch. And after we simulate with our improved digital twin, this system that doesn't represent any real physical system, but has two non-ideal timing pulleys, a square one and a one with a kind of egg shape, 3 bearings and a mass. And I have a video that shows the simulation this system. I will show it now. Yeah. A moment. Okay. So when the, sorry, I have to stop it one moment. When the belt is green, it is slacking. So basically, it is increasing the tension when this pulley is pulling, but the system will not move. For example, this mass will not start moving until the belt is orange. When it becomes red, it is shooting. That's the contact point of your time. On this paper, we just built the simulation. We didn't validate the model with a real system. We just limit ourselves to simulation. So basically, on this paper here, we validate our model of our previous paper using empirical data. We extend our model to consider many non-circular pulleys, slippage, non-ideal tension, and tooth mismatch. And we validate tooth mismatch with empirical data, and we simulate a case, one we just saw in the video, with the slippage and non-ideal tension. Now, finally, the fourth paper. On this one, we just jump outside the pulleys and we work with the other part of the printer. So essentially, this paper is motivated with the idea of a collaborative system between a 3D printer and a robot manipulator. The idea is like a 3D printer can fabricate parts. So in some sense can self-repair maybe. A robot manipulator can assemble parts. So by combining the two systems, we believe we can build something that can self-repair, self-assemble. And motivated by that idea, we ask ourselves, what if during the assembling process, the robot misplaced this column here. Let's say it put it a bit tilted. So the effective length of that column now is likely larger than it should. So we want to understand how that small perturbation of the column affects the printing process. And that is this paper about. So we designed this sample here, this square of 6 centimeters times 6 centimeters, and it's the thing we print in order to try to model the perturbation. Why we choose this particular 3D body? Because it's easy to measure, and because it has the proper size of all the parts of the manipulator. Let's say we want to print parts for the robot manipulator or parts of the printer. This area is almost enough to print everything. So we need to study mostly this area here. So after calibrating the printer a lot, we were able to print 10 different samples for different perturbations on the column. Here on the left, we see the thickness of the sample for different points when the perturbation is 0. Here, when the perturbation is basically when the column is 1/4 millimeter longer than it should, 1/2 millimeter, 3/4 millimeter, and 1 millimeter longer than it should. We see that the thickness of the sample starts to increase on the region near the extension of the length of the column. We can see also the precision. Basically, we're measuring with an error of 10 micro, which was very challenging. We had to calibrate the printer a lot to reach that kind of resolution, and we are very happy for that. So now we want to build a model. We build a model to analyze how the thickness of this sample changes as a function of the perturbation. We suggest this model here to predict the thickness of the sample. And we basically X and Y is the position where we're measuring over the sample. And A and B are functions that depends on the perturbation. A is linear with the parameter alpha, and B is quadratic with the parameter beta. Why we choose this value? It's a data-driven model. So basically, we observe the data, we guess this value, we guess this function, and we fit it after, and we are happy with what we obtain. Here we see the fitting of the functions A and B. We see the quadratic assumption is nice. and we see the linear one is good enough. Why we are happy enough with this? Because the error on the fitting is on the order of the error of the measurements. So then we know we cannot go beyond that. We cannot go beyond the error of the tools we are using to obtain the data. So we are happy with these approximations. Also, here now we see the fitting. Basically, the layers are the thickness of the sample for different perturbations. The data points are actual data, and the layers is the function we just fit. And we are happy with the results. So now we have a model to analyze how the thickness of the sample changes as a function of perturbations in the column. But we know, because we know that the 3D printer at some point might fail completely. In which sense? At some point, the distance between the bed and the nozzle will be too large, so the material will not attach to the bed, and the complete printing process will be a failure. That's why we model the distance between the nozzle and the bed, and we try to find the critical distance after what the system will completely fail. Basically, we try to find an unstable distance between the nozzle and the bed. And of course, that depends on the perturbation of the column. If the column is way longer, the nozzle is way separated, and the system is more likely to fail. This model here is constructed directly from the mechanical structure of the printer. So it's not data-driven. It's basically based on the design of the printer. So what we do is to add different perturbations in the column and try to find exactly the distance where the material stops attaching, which is this Z star. And by finding that distance, we can find unstable regions. So for example, here, this is a column, this is a top view of the printer. Sorry, I have to delay. So this is a top view of the printer. This is the bed here, the printing bed. And we are modifying, we are modifying the length of this column. The more we increase the length of this column here, the more an unstable region starts to cover the bed. So we found exactly this value here by experimentally, and we validate it by printing a body that covers the whole bed. It starts to fail more or less here, which is when it starts entering into the unstable region. So essentially, what we did on this paper, we construct and validate a stability model for the printing area, and we model how the deformation or the thickness of a body as a function of the perturbations on the column. We identify regions where the printer can self-repair and still print parts for the manipulator. So essentially, for example, we know that this region here is still stable, and we even know how the thickness of the body will be disturbed. So we can still maybe repair the printer given this information if something goes wrong. And now I will just close the conclusion. This is my last slide, conclusion of future work. So essentially on this work, we started with our first paper, the one with digital twin and the pulleys and the printer. And once we published this printer, we asked some questions to ourselves. For example, we asked, what if more pulleys are damaged? Or does it always work? Can we build a more complex system? On what if other parts of the printer are damaged? And by answering these 4 questions, we're able to do 4 papers from answering these questions. And this is more or less my path. And of course, these other publications, they raise more questions. I just put some of them here. I will go over them a bit fast. For example, what if we add AI to the self-repair process? And actually, we submit a paper with my colleague here, Piotr. Thank you. We submitted a paper 2 months ago, also in collaboration with Professor Schmidt-Tuger, where we consider adding AI to the self-repair process. What if we can print intelligence? This is an ongoing project with Professor Perron and some other students. Can we prove the conversions when the case where 2 pulleys are broken? It's an ongoing work. We are going to do it. Can we actually build a real self-replicator? Actually, a real self-replicator has many problems, like, for example, printing memory, printing logic, energy and resources, and how to control it. And we strongly believe, after doing this research, that we have tentative solutions for each one of these problems. And some other questions. What if the material is flexible, the one you're using to print? Can we model a power transmission system entirely flexible? This is actually a question from the audience during different conferences, which are very nice. And finally, once we spend a lot of time calibrating the printer here, we're able to print single layers of material, which was a bit interesting. And from there, we ask ourselves, can we print foldable robots? So can we use a 3D printer to print a two-dimensional layer to fold it into a three-dimensional robot again? Like, can we do it? Is it useful? Like, we believe a lot on this project. We have a lot of ideas related to this. And finally, yeah, honestly, because I really wanted to complete the space there. This is, yeah, this is kind of the final conclusion. We, after basically one of our most important messages, something that we learned from by doing this work, we know that 3D printing is extremely promising for self-repairing or self-replication because it's a device that can fabricate parts. However, nowadays, a desktop 3D printer, for example, the one I use on my research, can only print parts made of plastic. But of course, the printer is made of metal and has electronics. So still, that printer, it doesn't have technology enough to replicate or repair itself. If we have a more complex printer, also we have more complex components, so we still are in the same problem. So we believe that nowadays, I mean, there's a lot of people, of course, doing research on maximizing what a printer can do or increasing the number of materials that can be used, and that is helping for the self-repairing. And also, we believe another approach is to try to fabricate or design printers that are designed to self-repair, so they're simple enough for whatever they can do. They can, let's say, they can print their own parts. So there are these two approaches that is a conclusion that we reached with Professor Freedom. Yeah, there are these two possible ways of seeing the same problem. Try to have better printers that can print more parts or different parts, or have simpler printers that are easier to replicate. And yes, I have 2 minutes, so I would like to thank all people here. I know you're here in the audience because either you care about me or you care about self-repairing robots, and I like the both cases. I would like to thank to my wife for being here. In 2 days, it's our 6 years anniversary, like almost like a PhD. I would like to also thank Professor Peyton for the very strong guidance on the first paper and the very strong trust on the other papers. I really appreciate that too much. Thank you to Abdurrahman. Yeah, Abdurrahman, because he delayed his flight 2 times just to attend my thesis. And honestly, thank you very much, thank you everyone on Zoom and in person. Thank you a lot. Yeah, that's it.
Renzo, at this point, we will start the questions part of the defense, and we will begin with questions from the general audience, and then we will deploy the torture rack, which is hiding there. Meaning the faculty will be asking, and the committee will be asking questions separately. So, general audience, do you have any questions? Let's see. Correct.
Yeah, there is some recent work about the thinking of space. They have been very successful attempts. So given that my model only assumes correctly printing, I would say that by using that technology and this model, you can see some different space. Exactly, yes. But I'm assuming using technology of these people who already prove that they can fit in those space. Yeah. I don't know the details of technology. I know it is possible. Even on the space station, they were able to fabricate a good human made of size space with a space or something like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Are there other questions? Yes, Yasmin?
now for me to consider error repeating problem, I haven't analyzed it completely. I have observed the iterations, I have a few of iterations, most of the time, yeah. I have some plots and also with period of conversion for many mechanisms. After 3 or 4 iterations, there is an error below the error repeater, so it's too much in experiment. Mathematically, I think the error, okay, it's a good question. What is the error to the error in mathematics? I would say the test is a condition. But I cannot say, for example, I know the physics, the fluid, I know the conversion, the speed of conversion, why the thing is a condition, and that's exactly how it is.
But let me ask, nevertheless, didn't you show like quadratic convergence with the first simple mathematical model? Yes. Or
They're showing conversion, but I don't define a kind of conversion. So this is the depend on the condition.
okay.
Yeah. It's more than analyzing.
Yes, Brian.
So I have a different question, but for all the different things that we study and discover from work, what was the most surprising? What was the thing that you've seen okay. Thank you. Yes, sorry. If you want, I can repeat your question so they online people can,
Yeah, so I was just asking, like, during your research, what was the thing that was most surprising to you or most unexpected in terms of the results that you saw? I mean, like, obviously, you had this convergence early on. I don't know if that was something that you expected, or was that something, that was surprising, or, when you added the 2 models together, or...
I understand. I would say that maybe not surprising, but something extremely key and extremely simple at the same time is finding this equivalent class for pulleys, given the convex hull. That sounds silly, but it took me some time to notice that. And based on that, I built all the models. So it's very important. When you ask me what's more interesting, let me think. There is something. Well, basically on the last year, almost at the end of my PhD, I started to focus too much here. I started to actually believe that self-repair systems are possible nowadays. I think to start believing on that and thinking that there are solutions for these key problems and thinking that actually it can be addressed nowadays, it was something for me kind of, yes. Yeah, it was very interesting, to start to believe on actually self-repair systems. I would say that is the main change on my mindset after doing this research. Thank you, Alan, for the question.
Sorry if this question is annoying, but what's the advantage of self-repair versus self-diagnosis and then having another robot repair? Like the robot that needs repair.
Okay, actually, okay. That is a very interesting question. But why? Because I think that we are entering into this problem here, complexity versus self-repair. Remember on the second paper where I say we can add a camera to the system, by adding self-diagnosis, you're adding feedback to the system. Feedback requires sensors. Sensors require technology. So we have to be a bit careful about the kind of feedback that we decide to add to our self-repair system. Now you can say we have an external robot that repairs it after it's said, okay, it's the same answer. It's about the feedback. All is about the feedback. Feedback, as I show on the second paper, is extremely powerful. By adding feedback, we were able to self-repair at once from a system which was not able to self-repair at all. But what is the price of this feedback? On the sense of increase the complexity of the system. That would be my answer to your question. I hope it's here.
Yeah, same thing here. My question might be annoying, but let's say that in the beginning you showed that displacement is periodic because you use the triangular shape or other shapes. And then you showed two pulleys that superposition false for them. Did you try some experiments when displacement is not periodic? So let's say in the process when you at first print the second pulley, okay, your initial pulley changes over time, okay? So then it's also gonna be kind of periodic, but like, you know, period would change over time. So,
Yeah, thank you for the excellent question. That question is actually related with a question I had in ACC 2022. Someone asked me, what if the pool is flexible? So that means what if you get the form over time? To be completely honest, it is extremely possible to simulate that. It will increase the complexity of my simulator because I would have to add probably finite elements. I wish probably as far as I understand, I would have to solve a PDE to find a new shape of the pulley, given the new shape, apply my model to find the instant displacement for that shape. And basically I need to, at each step, to find a new shape of the pulley. So I will still be able to find a function for the instant displacement given that case. Sorry, I just need any instant displacement. Yeah. I will still find an instant displacement, which might have period 2 pi or no. Most likely at some point will be periodic, and probably it will be 2 pi also. Also, I need to consider the tension on the belt to know how much it gets deformed. I mean, there are a lot of things we have to consider. It is possible. It's just more complicated. And if you ask me if we still achieve self-repair in that case, where the pulley gets deformed over time, I would answer that because it's a question I was thinking about for 2 years after the question of this person on the audience. I would answer that depends on the material. It depends if the second pulley obtained also it gets deformed or not. Because if we use a proper material for the second pulley, we come back to the initial problem. Now we have a very strange pulley, but it's rigid. So we can apply the model from the first paper. So we know we will converge. If the material is also flexible, let's say we have a printer, the only material we have is this flexible CPU, and we want to repair the printer anyway. I haven't done experiments, but I believe the system will converge to circular small pulleys or to zero. The pulley will shrink and disappear at some point. That is what I believe from my understanding of my own simulation. Yeah. So you need to add some corrector fact, you need to add some correction. It will not, an open loop without feedback, it will not repair anymore. Yeah. Thank you a lot for the question. Simon?
doesn't it mean that you can actually converge from one shape of the pulley to another one without like any difficulties with repetitive printing? So let's say you had a circular pulley, but at some point you need a triangular to print some other shape. Or it's maybe might be not for the printer, or like, you know, that you can actually convert from one shape to another.
Yeah, I understand your question. Actually, your question is related to one experiment we did again on the first paper. I will let me just put context. Yeah. Yeah. So basically your question is if we can converge in open loop, at least, because if we have feedback, if we know what we are doing and we have information, we can do whatever we want. But in open loop, what if basically, I think your question is related, what if, just 1 second. Yeah. What if our reference here is a triangular pulley? So we start with a strange initial condition, let's say a square pulley, and our reference a triangular pulley. In that case, experimentally, we show that we don't converge. We stay on a stable point, which is a pulley with a strange shape. Experimentally, we observe that. We observe that we cannot converge. Only the circular pulleys, as the theorem says, for this iterative process, only the circular pulleys is a attractive fixed point. Other references will converge to other points that are not equal to reference. So, okay, I will reformulate. Only the circular pulley as reference is also an attractive fixed point. Other references are not attractive fixed points as far as experiments have shown. I didn't prove that. But so to answer your question, no, you cannot converge to a triangle. If you want to print that, you put as a reference a triangular pulley, and you do this process many times, you will not converge to a triangle. I can spoil it. You will converge to a strange long triangle because I have done experiments and I have seen that. Yeah. Okay. Then yes, because you achieve the ideal states, then you can do whatever you want. Okay. So essentially, what you're saying, if we try to print in open loop a circular pulley, and we converge to the circular pulley, now the print is working ideally. Now from there, you can print, you can do whatever you want. You can print out. Yeah. It's a good way of thinking. Thank you.
Anybody online who would like to ask a question outside the committee?
Oh, sorry.
Anybody online would like to ask a question? Somebody from outside the committee? No. Well, this concludes the public performance of Renzo. So thank you again. And now I'm going to ask the audience, the public audience, to leave the room. You're welcome to stay. Finish the buffet before the seagulls take care of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congrats, Renzo.